Welcome to ChiroSphere, where we talk about all things chiropractic and some things, well, not so chiropractic. I'm Dr. Ray Foxworth, your host for ChiroSphere and CEO of ChiroHealth USA, the network that works for chiropractic. Today, I have the privilege of hearing from Dr. Brandon Steele, or you have the privilege of hearing from Dr. Brandon Steele, a prominent figure in chiropractic care and orthopedics. Dr. Steele's journey into the world of rehabilitation began with a bang as he created and implemented groundbreaking programs for sports teams such as the St. Louis Cardinals, St. Louis Rams, and Blues. Now, as a leading practitioner at Premier Rehab in the greater St. Louis area, he continues to push the boundaries of evidence-based treatment for musculoskeletal disorders. Beyond his clinical practice, Dr. Steele is committed to advancing the profession. He is co-founder of ChiroUp, a groundbreaking resource utilized by chiropractors in colleges worldwide, cementing his status as a thought leader and innovator in the field. Welcome, Brandon.
You know what? I need to get the transcript of that bio. It sounds much better than the bio that I put out for speaking engagements. So I appreciate it. Makes me sound good.
Yeah, you usually the ones that they would write for me sound like my mother did it. So they're always they always hit the highlights and none of the downside. So,
exactly. Well, thanks for having me, Ray.
Oh, absolutely, man. I enjoyed sharing the stage with you in St. Louis. Almost a year ago, I guess it was, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So, can you share some of your most memorable experiences from working with the sports team, the Cardinals, Rams, and Blues, and how those experiences may have influenced your approach to rehab? I mean, because you're dealing with elite athletes.
Yeah, I've had a couple stories. Actually, the first one, I was fortunate enough to get a residency with Clayton Skaggs. A good friend of mine, a titan in the profession, Brett Winchester, was able to weasel me into that position, and just never learned more in my life. And so we were able to work with post-surgical rehab for many of the Cardinals, the Blues, the Rams. And I got to tell you, my first day was probably 5:30 in the morning. It was winter time in St. Louis, and I get to an area of St. Louis that it's nice, but it's not a place you go at dark. And I get to the front door, and I have these key fobs, a beautiful state-of-the-art facility, and there's a homeless guy sitting outside, and I'm trying to be quiet, getting through the snow to get inside the building, and he gets up and starts walking. And next to me, I'm like, okay, I'm getting robbed. We're gonna see how this rolls. And it was a professional hockey player, and so he's a well-known patient, and he looked homeless. And I think that's one of the most interesting things that I learned is that different athletes have different personalities, and the different athletes per sport actually have different personalities. That my hockey players were just down to the earth, gritty people, and I enjoyed working with them. Baseball were highly driven, very good athletes, but when you got poking on them and you started working with them, they didn't feel like elite athletes. They were muscular, they were great athletes, but they didn't have that same an Olympic athlete kind of feel to them. Yeah, but they were salt of the earth, drove pickup trucks to the clinic. And football players were a whole different breed. They would test you a little bit. So I think by learning about that, I got to experience a lot of different personalities and understand with athletes that you can't beat them. And I learned that really from Stuart McGill is that when you have an elite athlete in front of you, regardless of their deficit, whether it's a functional deficit, whether it's an orthopedic problem, you can't highlight their deficit. Instead, you can only build on it because this is an elite athlete. Let's face it, they're bigger, stronger, faster than you and I will ever be. And they know that. So they're not going to take advice from a 22-year-old graduate of a chiropractic school on how to improve their athleticism. All I can do is to find those deficits and then to insert some rehab and advice to build on their strengths instead of focus on their weaknesses.
So, as you got into those different teams, how were you received by the medical providers, and what did you do to put any resistance to rest?
We were on the outside, so we had our own facility. We did not integrate at all with the sports teams. So the sports teams would send people to us. I don't know I don't want to say the politics of this, but there are team chiropractors and there are team medical doctors and there are team athletic trainers, and then there's the people that those athletes see, and sometimes they're two different groups. So we were the group of people that when there was a problem with an athlete, there was a running back in St. Louis that had several discectomies on his lower back, and eventually he decided to pursue an office that approached it differently, which was us. So whenever you can help an athlete, and in that case, any kind of a patient, if I see a patient with plantar fasciitis and I'm able to help that patient, naturally that patient starts to tell their friends and family around them. So we were I think the official providers for the Cardinals at some point. But then as soon as you do a good job, they continue to come see you.
So clearly, we've got a wide variety of doctors that might be listening to this podcast. What advice would you give to some of the newer doctors or someone who's been in practice for a while that want to build a relationship? Maybe not with, a professional sports team, but even with local sports team, your colleges, your high schools and junior highs.
It's to show value. And it's, in fact, we were at Vegas together, and Simon Sinek was there. And one of the interesting things that he's always said is how to build your brain and how to build your vision. And then whatever you do when you build your company, it can't be self-serving. So when you're building your vision, it's got to be something that attracts people who believe what you believe. And it's something that is not, I don't treat patients so they can pay me. I treat patients because I believe I can help them. And the same goes with a sports team, is that when you find a track coach, when you find a basketball coach, whatever it is the niche you want to get into, you need to show them some kind of value on what you can do for them. And then you gotta back it up. So often I'll see a chiropractor or an athletic trainer or medical doctor that says they can do everything. You can't, and that's okay. But you have to be really good at doing a couple things. So, let's just say if it's a track coach, I work with our local high school, with our running club. And it's a very symbiotic relationship that when they have a problem that's acute, they unfortunately have an ATC in their, they're just paid by the hospital to be in that high school to help them. But unfortunately, the way my conversation went with that coach is, listen, for every patient, every student that you have that's hurt, send them to the ATC and see if they can get it to go away. Those acute pains are sometimes best dealt with the things they can offer. But if you can find a student athlete that's not getting better, send them my way. And I think that's where, especially in medical marketing, a lot of people fail, is that they'll talk with a medical doctor, hey, send me everything. I can treat back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain. Well, that's okay. However, they need to know the specific audience that you can treat. They need to know exactly when you treat them, and probably more importantly, when you release them, because that's the number one fear in medical doctor, but also with the parent, that once you see a chiropractor, they have to see you forever. And I do believe we should treat patients forever, but not for the same condition. And if you're good enough to treat one condition, you'll probably be good enough the next time they have another problem to treat. So yeah, find your niche, make sure that you cement that. Here's exactly what I can do. Here's exactly how long it takes to treat, and then deliver on it.
Yeah. Something I found in my career, in contrast to what I've seen some others do, is, like you said, they want to be able to treat every patient of theirs. And the reality is, when you position yourself as a replacement for medical care or athletic training, you will never be part of the team. And I think changing that mindset to, I am part of the team, but I'm not the only member of the team. I really think that's probably the better approach to take. I'll never forget whenever I started the chiropractic program at the VA Medical Center here. I had to interview with all of the heads of the departments, orthopedics, neuro, right on down the line, and man, at the misconceptions that they had. But the biggest resistance I got was from the physical medicine, the director of the physical medicine department. He was an Asian gentleman, and he very clearly told me the first time we met, he said, you make sure you don't step on any toes that you didn't intend to. And I said, well, Doc, I appreciate your being so candid. I said, I'll stay in my lane if you'll stay in yours. So I got literally from almost the first week of the VA, I got referrals from almost every other department And in the 4 years I did that, I never got one referral from physical medicine and rehab. Again, because of his mindset. It was really interesting to run into that and try to navigate around it. But there are some situations where you're just not going to. So go on to the next team, if you would. I also know that you're on the executive board of the Illinois Chiropractic Society, and I'm sure that offers some unique insights to the profession's challenges and opportunities. So, Brandon, what do you see as some of the trends or developments in chiropractic care that either you find exciting or concerning?
Oh boy. Well, as you know, every chiropractor should be involved in their state association. I mean, the money is great. So yeah, you can, but I always end all my
Only paid board
seminars.
members, right?
Exactly. The perks are phenomenal. Um, but the way I feel about association work is that if you're not, in the world of legislation, if you're not sitting at the table, you're getting served, and that's happened so many times. We're lucky in Illinois. We have an executive director that I believe is top tier. I mean, the
No
guy
doubt
is
about it.
phenomenal. And so I've been fortunate enough to learn from one of the best. So one thing that I have learned, which is interesting, is how much we shoot within the profession, which I just find unique. I don't see it so many other places. So I do think there is a need as we progress, if we're going to progress, to somehow find a way to become a scalable profession. Because I've got little kids, and if my little kid, my 8-year-old, gets an ear infection, and I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, like it or not, right or wrong, if I take him to the pediatrician, what does he get? Amoxicillin. If we're in Mississippi, I'm in Alaska, it doesn't matter. It's a standard of care. You have these signs and symptoms, you get this treatment. And we don't have that. And I think there's a plus and a minus to that. But if I take the same patient that has the same signs, symptoms, and again, the 10 chiropractors, I probably get 10 different diagnoses, and I get 37 different treatments. And that's one of the unique things about chiropractic that makes it not scalable. And because when we look as a third-party administrator, an insurance company says, okay, what does a chiropractor do? I have no idea. I work with 3,000 chiropractors around the world, and we have a really good idea of what we do as far as how we diagnose and how we treat. But when I send a patient to another chiropractor, they move out of state and they see another chiropractor, I'm like, I don't know. So I think that the first thing we can do as a profession is determine what we do and why we do it. And I think that so many people are afraid of evidence, which I just find unique. And I think that, learning to be an evidence-based chiropractor as a student was like this group of people who like read research, and they try to sift out what we could find in the research to help us as a profession. You don't have to be a researcher. You don't have to do anything in today's world. The research all points to non-surgical, non-pharmacological care is the best thing for musculoskeletal pain. So we get people in our profession, like the Whedons and the Gertz and the Schneiders, who are the Greensteins, who are killing it with the research. But we also have people outside of the profession telling us how great we are. We're seeing articles in Archives of Physical Medicine, JAMA. It doesn't matter what it is, on how great we are and all the things we can do. So I wish we could eliminate the need to categorize ourselves as an activator doc or a diversified doc or an evidence-based doc or a straight doc. Patients don't care. We care so much about those things. However, I believe there's a space for all of those things. It just needs to follow the treatment plan, that if you have someone with a specific condition that requires strengthening, I don't really care what program you do. So just strengthen them. If they need, a specific, they have benign positional vertigo, can we recognize it and can we all treat it? What myofascial release technique you do and how you manipulate, nobody besides us cares. Let's just get the job done.
Yeah, they don't care if you
And
do voodoo as long as you get them better.
Yeah, and then document. I think that's the second part of the piece of the puzzle. But Mark is the executive director, Mark the on the chiropractic side. But there was a pilot program done in Chicago. This is 10 to 15 years ago. But he let me know the statistics on how well we document. And it's not good. I'm not even going to say the number on the podcast. But we don't document as a profession very well as far as what we're treating, while we're treating it. Do our notes match up with our bills? Do our bills, is it supported in our notes? And that's something that I do think has to be corrected, because if you want to take data and say how great we are, then you need to have the data and compare apples to apples as compared to apples to, just like we talked about, a fruit salad. So that's kind of where we are right now. Is if we want to say as a profession we're really good at treating, a lumbar spine disc lesion with a sciatica, then we need to have data that says for these 1,000 chiropractors and these 700,000 patient encounters, here's what we saw. Here's how many times we saw them. Here's our patient satisfaction. Here's how much it costs. And here's how great we are. So if you want to take the same matched cohort in a PT or medical clinic, here's our cohort, and show me yours. And I think we're going to win that battle every time.
When you talk about the many different ways that chiropractors practice, it really is a crapshoot for patients when they're trying to find a chiropractor. Whatever their first chiropractic experience is what chiropractic is to them. And then if something happens and they need to change chiropractors, like you said, they may encounter an entirely different approach. And that absolutely does make it a challenge to scale. I had this conversation with Dr. Tom Clapp a few years back before he passed, and the conversation kind of evolved around, because we do have diversity in the profession, the ability to get unity without uniformity, I think, which is one of the drivers of the chiropractic strategic plan, is when we look at our profession compared to, and I love studying other professions. I subscribe to dental economics, medical economics, and podiatry. I love looking at their journals and learning from them, what has happened in their world. And, in the medical world, over time, there was just, the family MD, the general practitioner. But over time, as expertise developed, they evolved into specialties. And so Tom and I were having this conversation at a bar one evening. He said, we ought to do a skit of a bunch of folks sitting in a bar, and for this instance, it's dentist. And the dentists are sitting there, and if you can imagine the chiropractic tones of the conversations, like one dentist leans over the other and said, "You see that guy over there? All he does is fix cavities. He's not really a dentist. He's not really a doctor." And then, and then the other guy says, "Well, look at that guy over there. What is he doing calling himself a dentist? All he does is cosmetic dentistry. That's really not what dentistry is about." And so, as you let that scenario play out, what you begin to see is, in our profession compared to theirs, we simply haven't evolved to the point to where there are doctors who specialize in structural changes. There are doctors that specialize in or focus on nutrition. There are doctors that focus on performance enhancement. And so until we evolve to that point, I think it is important that we be real clear with our patients of what our brand or what our model is of chiropractic. And if they do choose to leave us, maybe make them aware of, hey, there may be another approach that may be better suited for you. So that's the other thing that you mentioned that I want to elaborate on is, because we interact with so many different chiropractors, in our company, everything from the evidence-based to very philosophically based. The one thing that I have found as a divide is, like you said, the resistance to evidence-based treatment or protocols. And to my knowledge, almost everything that comes out now that has to do with chiropractic and research does nothing but reaffirm what we have been saying for years. And it truly is a validation of what we do versus an attack on what we do. I wish some doctors would begin to understand that evidence does not mean you can't practice the way you want to. It means you can practice the way you want to, but along the way, you may learn something that helps you become a better doctor, to have better outcomes, to have better satisfied patients. So we need to be a little more open to that, I think, as a profession. Welcome back to our podcast with Dr. Brandon Steele. So, Brandon, as a co-founder of ChiroUp, you've played a significant role in advancing chiropractic globally. I mean, you guys are really having a huge impact. What really inspired you to create the resource, and how do you see it shaping the future of the profession?
Well, to be 100% transparent, it was built out of not laziness, but automation for our own clinic. That we have 3 providers, and we realized quickly that even with 3 providers who went to the same school and have similar conversations and mindset and diagnoses, we're still very different in how we treat it, both in our reported findings, but even more so in our recommendations at home and rehabilitation exercises, is that we just weren't on the same page. And for our patient care, if I'm going to, as a provider, be able to have associates and independent contractors work in my clinic, I need to make sure I know what everyone's doing. And most importantly, the patient needs to know what they're getting into when they see a different provider. So we created ChiroUp to standardize what we do in our practice. Still give us the autonomy to add our special flavor to a different diagnosis, but we need to know what the diagnosis is and what the standard things that we're going to do from that as far as manipulation, manual therapy, exercise. That's where it started. And then we were pretty proud. And that, I mean, to build a software program as a chiropractor, obviously not in our wheelhouse. We paid a company to, and Tim and I had it on pieces of paper of each page and what it would do. And if anybody knows Tim Bertelsmann, he is a highly organized, highly process-driven person. And the company looks at it and says, it's going to be about $10,000. So we embarked on that process, and a year later, and many multiples over that initial quote, we came up with a cool program that we started using in our practice, and it was awesome. It worked really good. And then we made, I'm going to say the mistake, but really it's turned into ChiroLove, is we showed other people what we've been doing. And in Illinois, we'd show our friends and our family and the people in the profession, like, well, I want to use it too. And well, that's not what we built it for. We were just using it for our clinic. And then we started to have other people use it. And then we started taking, this was the mistake, taking suggestions. And now the thing that we created was a pure selfish indulgence to make our life easier in practice. And now we have a say in it, but our program is 100% built, the functionality, the pieces, the recent updates on what our subscribers want. So we survey them and say, what do you want? What can we do to make your life easier? And then Tim and I sit down and get a touch creative and try to figure out a way to make it happen. And all that has led into the last 2 years, which is building an EMR. And if you know me, I am not, like Brandon is not designed to build an EMR. I'm a creative person. I'm one of those people that has ideas but can't figure out how to do it. Tim is both. If you've read Rocket Fuel, the visionary and the integrator as far as the ELS system. So he is the guy to do it. But even between him and I, it was too big of a project. So we had enough subscribers from around the world that have chipped in endless time, hours, and feedback, Zoom calls to finally put together what we think is needed for the profession. And then we just started doing it. And I think it has to do, if you want to, swim across the ocean, at the very beginning, it's pretty easy. You're at the shore and you start swimming. Well, halfway through, you're just in the middle of the ocean. You don't know which way to go. You don't even know your problems until they happen. So we've been over our head so many times, and we've found that we've used consultants and people in the profession that have said, it'd be really great if you guys did this. It'd be really great if, as far as billing, I don't understand chiropractic billing. We have 4 billing specialists that consult with us to build the ultimate billing integration. The same goes for taking notes and scheduling. And we think we've created an iteration of an EHR that is going to be unique that we're already using in our practice. And I would love to say it was this dream of Tim and I's. It's not. It's not at all. It's a dream of the profession, of these people that we hang around, and we've turned it into a piece of reality.
You know, I too am a big fan of Traction, the entrepreneurial operating system, and I've jokingly, told my team, while I'm the visionary of the company, it is so important to have that integrator or the person that can make it come to life, because as a visionary, sometimes we have a hard time distinguishing between a vision and a hallucination. And my team is very, very good at pointing out when I'm having an hallucination versus a vision. So it's good to have those different personalities on board.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And the one lesson that I've learned, let me say two lessons, because the first lesson is humility, that not all my ideas are good. And a lot of times that I'll have an idea that I think is great, and then you run it past your team. I'm sure you've had this, and everybody's like, "Yeah, Ray, that's a great idea. Let's put some thought into that." And then you quickly know that probably wasn't that great of an idea. And I get that in our team meetings all the time. And so I've learned, one, humility to understand that not all my ideas are great. But then I think that the lesson that I really have learned is to put thought into an idea before saying it. And that when you start to criticize your own idea before telling other people, then you can poke the holes in it that your team is going to obviously do. And if you can have an idea that you can't poke a hole in, then I bring it to the team, and sometimes they laugh, and the other times like, yeah, that was pretty good. So that's what my life, and I'm sure you as a visionary, you even encountered
No
many
doubt
times.
about it. Something else you mentioned earlier, I think that's important, particularly for doctors or particularly for practices who have multiple doctors. Just something that I experienced. Um, I had a couple of associates early on in practice, and I did it all the wrong way. And then at one point, I actually had my father as an associate, and I
Oh,
had to fire him. I had to fire him twice. I had to fire him because whenever I would leave, to go to an event or something, I would come back and he would have done something entirely different than what I did for that patient. And so you have to understand how that affects a patient's mind. It's like, well, Dr. Matthews did it this way, Dr. Foxworth did it this way, and it creates confusion and uncertainty. Um, and when that is in a patient's mind, it's like, well, was what Dr. Ray was doing wrong, or
mhm.
was this a better way? And so, for anyone that has multiple doctors in the practice, again, like you said, you don't have to do everything the same, but I think having that consistency in the patient experience is absolutely critical. And so when I hired a good friend of mine who had run a multi-doctor practice for 20 plus years, and I said, Dave, I've gotten it wrong 2 or 3 times now. What am I doing wrong? And he walked me through this process of how to really onboard a new practitioner. And basic, I'll try to make it short, but he said, Ray, your patients in your practice have bought you. You bring in somebody else and they're doing something different. You're not going to see them transition from one provider to another or be willing to see one provider or another when you're out. He said, so the best thing that you can do is have your new doctor literally shadow you for a month or two before they ever lay hands on a patient. And I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I'm going to be paying this associate doctor to basically do nothing but be my shadow. He said, absolutely, positively. They need to see how you do your consult, how you do your exam, how you do your report of findings. When you side posture, does the top hand go on the left, or do they go on the right? And literally look at every nuance that you're doing to where if they end up seeing that patient, they can kind of duplicate the experience. Certainly, we all color it to some degree. And Brandon, I'll never forget one of the first times I had to leave the office after bringing in my absolutely wonderful doctor, Dr. Cephalou. I got a call from Judge Jimmy Morton, and he said, Ray, I just left your clinic. And I said,
Oh,
I'm like, oh my God, what am I? He said, I had to call you and tell you that if it were not the difference in your voices, I would not have known that wasn't you adjusting me. And I thought, holy freaking cow. And what's really interesting is that I had some patients who would want to leave me to start seeing Dr. Cephalou. And if your ego isn't in the right place, you'll be like, oh my God, what are they doing? Transferring to another doctor. Docs, that's one of the best compliments you could ever have. It means that you have begun to be able to scale yourself and not always feel like it's a ball and change. If you're not there, the practice isn't going to run. So, if you're thinking about adding an associate, take that time on the front end to really kind of groom them. And the other thing that Dave taught me that was really important, he said, you got a new doctor out of school and he's kind of like Dr. Brandon Steele. He thinks he can do everything
Yeah.
for about the first week. You need to let them know that there is, in our case, the Foxworth way. And I don't want to necessarily hear anything that you want to do different until you're a master at this. And then we can begin to integrate some of the ideas again, because those patients in that practice have bought you and you are chiropractic to them. And so to introduce them to a new doctor who's doing something entirely different can really undermine the ability for you to really scale your practice in the future.
So I love what you're saying because I can relate to that. That 5 years ago we've had multiple associates, but Tim and I own the practice, and the first time that I had a patient leave me to go see Dr. Brown, our associate doctor, I was hurt. Like I felt it. I was like, why is this patient on his schedule? Well, they said they wanted to schedule Dr. Brown, and I actually talked to Tim that evening after patients, and he was like, you did it. He said, we're finally at the point where Dr. Brown is practicing similar to us. He's more available as far as time goes. And now patients are electing to, select a different doctor. And he was excited about it, where I was, let me go, have a glass of wine that night because my patients are leaving me. So I think that's one thing. I think another thing you said that I find so interesting is that consistency is hard. That as a provider to teach that is very difficult. Some people want to have their own special flavor. However, we talked about me being part of the Illinois Chiropractic Society a while back, and one of my responsibilities was to go to past people who were dropping out of the ICS or people who were failing in practice to figure out what I could do to help. And the number one thing that I heard in a young practitioner's out of their mouth was that, yeah, came in, I bought this practice. This guy was doing it all wrong. So I started doing everything right, and now all my patients are leaving. Like, patients come to see the style of practice. They don't come to see you. So don't walk into a practice and try to change everything. You have to practice similar to that past chiropractor, at least for an extended period of time, to build that trust and build that rapport with that patient before you can even think about changing the recipe, because you're the product. You just change the product on the patient and they may not like it. So that's a tough thing to learn, sometimes as a young practitioner, that you don't know everything.
Yeah. So with your experience, I know you lecture, you're a practitioner, and you're an innovator in the field. What do you see as some of the most pressing challenges for the profession moving forward, and how can we address them?
Number one is data. That we don't have, at least that I'm aware of. We have several innovators and thought leaders in the profession, like yourself, like Brad Cost and Infinity. We have people who are trying to get more and more data to say what we do works, because we know it does. We just don't have standardized data, and we don't have a data lake with multiple EHRs, and we definitely don't have the note-taking system that's going to be needed to document what we do and why we do it. So that's why I think things are important. And let me explain a little further. So if you have a patient that comes into your office versus my office versus the next patient office, we have a very different intake information. So we may have the same demographics, but what questions did you ask the patient? What diagnosis did you come up with? What treatments did you provide? Those are the kind of things that we need to have into one system to make sure that we know how the patient presented, what the diagnosis was, and what the treatments conferred were. The uncertainty that happens and the issue that happens is that based off these 12 symptoms, Ray may call it lumbar spine disc sprain. Brandon may call it cassette syndrome. Susie down the street calls it a stenosis. The next person calls it a segmental joint dysfunction. and we all document it differently. Well, unfortunately, with that one diagnosis, what treatments do we confer from that? If you have a stenosis, you probably do different things than you do for a lumbar spine sprain. If you have a SES syndrome, you do things different than a disc lesion. Well, the education of the provider and the ability to diagnose that patient with that diagnosis ultimately determines the treatments. Well, we have a standardized list of symptoms. Why are we not looking at that and saying that, 96% of chiropractors call this diagnosis, and when they provide these treatments, they get this success rate. We have the ability to do that. That's everybody. I mean, with AI and data collection, everybody can do that now. We just need good data. So I had a chiropractor contact me that says, listen, if you guys ever incorporate AI into ChiroUp, I'm leaving your service. And I appreciate that comment. And I responded back to that comment because that's a real feeling. But in today's world, everything that we have around us is using AI, whether you like it or not. The question is what data you're pulling from. So if I pull from Google and I say, create a note for Ray Foxworth with right shoulder pain that he's been having for 3 months, it creates a really cool note. I mean, you can create a soap note for a fictitious patient in seconds. It's not right. It's not, but it can do it. But the real question is, where are we getting our data from? And if we can create a standardized set of intake information, then we can start to correlate those to the things down the chain. We've been doing our office for about a year, and the things you learn from data, it's humbling. Because you think you're really good at something, and then you actually look at the raw data and you're like, well, maybe I could improve. And so that's where I think the profession's going to go. We're going to get better at collecting data, and we're also going to be hopefully working hand in hand with the researchers. One of the biggest things that researchers have is collecting data. And if we can import standardized surveys into different people's offices, those people wanting to participate in research, then now we can help researchers develop that data. So we can seamlessly work into a research study as an individual office and help each other, realistically look better. At the end of the day, though, what I'd really like is to give patients a better idea of what we do. There's so many times I hear about a chiropractor that sees every single patient 3 times a week for 4 weeks, and twice a week for 4 weeks, and 1 time a week for 4 weeks, and then for the rest of your life. And I do believe there's a piece to that, but there's some people who need that. I think for a cervical joint headache, for vertigo, for SI joint dysfunction, we probably don't need that. And if we could start to develop an idea that based on this diagnosis, how long it should take for that tissue to heal, because that's really what we're doing with our prognosis, is that if you have tendinopathy, we got to not only calm things down, but we need to actually build things back up. It's going to take a little bit of time, right? Well, our patient need to understand that, and that if we can say, hey, for this diagnosis, the average patient takes 3 weeks. I'm going to see you for 3 weeks. I'm going to do this. You're going to do this. And it's going to take this much time. And we can, I don't want to say guess, but if we can look at the data and we can tell the patient within a realistic expectation, it's only going to make us look better. So I'm also, be an echo of what Trevor said, I'm also not interested in AI taking over our note-taking system and how we treat. But I do think if we can feed computer systems information about our practice, I do believe they're going to help us help patients more efficiently and more effectively. And I'm excited to learn from what my data says.
Yep. For those that may not be aware, we've been involved from the get-go with the chiropractic strategic plan. And one of the pillars in that plan is research and data. And so you mentioned Brad, Cost, and Jay. They're kind of they're the leaders of that pillar. And for those that don't know Brad, he has invested millions in this profession of his personal time. He brought on the Oklahoma, I believe it's OSU, Oklahoma State University. Literally, their students going through who are going to be data scientists and data researchers to help us begin to build that data lake. And to my amazement, something you don't normally see in chiropractic, Jay and Brad have been able to get, I think, 5 or 6 different EHR companies to be willing to contribute to that data lake. And while the data lake is important, I think, you've heard garbage in, garbage out. I think what you guys are doing at ChiroUp and in helping doctors provide more evidence-based care or evidence-informed care, I think that will do nothing but help improve the data. Because like you said, if we're calling a condition 5 different things with 5 different doctors, really how clean and accurate is the data? I mean, it's kind of the garbage in and garbage out. So I think to the degree that we can begin to standardize our questioning, our evaluation, um, and document the outcomes for the patients and also for those that are sometimes footing the bill, I think over time it will do nothing but increase the level of acceptance and of chiropractic by the public, by the payers, by the policymakers. Because if you don't have the data, or if you don't own the data is going to be whoever owns the data is going to own you, and that's what we've seen happen with the insurance companies. And so it's really encouraging to see our profession taking the step to build its own data lake, to where the researchers really can pull from millions of claims. I just think that is so critical. So you guys rolled out the EMR, EHR at Parker Vegas this year. We enjoyed kind of sharing some booth space with you, or right behind us.
Yeah.
What do you see? I mean, clearly you've had experience with other software programs. What really is going to set this apart from the others that are out there?
Well, once again, it was not Tim and I's idea to create an EMR or an EHR. It was the continued persistence of the people we work with and the things that they wanted. Oddly enough, first one was customer support, which is odd. The average rating of the current EHR is a 6.2 out of 10, which is not great. So they want someone who's responsive to what their needs are. The second one was to take a note. And I'm going to unveil a little bit of a unique thought that when people first looked at, they were like, well, that doesn't really make sense. But once I hopefully get through it, I think it will make sense that, Ray, when you first see a patient, you have to get their subjective correct. You need to understand what's the complaint. And then when you're in the room with them, you'll get the complaint, and then you'll, as a doctor, you'll go through your work exam, your physical exam, you'll poke on the patient, prod on the patient. You'll, whether you treat that visit or not, but you'll have a good idea of what's wrong with the patient and what you're going to do to the patient. And the patient leaves your office, and then you take your note. That's the average way a chiropractor does their note. So by the time you take your note, you already have the assessment, correct? You already have your differential diagnosis. So in the current way we do notes, we do SOAP. However, that's actually not the way it flows for most chiropractors. We do S, then we do A, and then we need to know the O that backs up the A. And then if we know the A, we know the diagnosis, we know the evidence-based treatments for that because it's already stored within ChiroUp. We should also know the P. So what we've done is we've created a note system that allows you to, one, automatically get the subjective through a survey system that we give to our patients. A new patient takes about 3 minutes. The average interim visit, the next visit after the first visit, it's only 5 questions. It takes anywhere between 30 seconds and a minute. But I already have my subjective, and that subjective is not just random. It's not the same questions. That's useless. Nobody needs that for. It actually builds off the questions they insert in the first survey. So now with a survey system, when they first come in, we know what their subjective is. We also will automatically, based on a body picker and the way they answer their questions, we'll know what functional disability in the seat to automatically ask them. So we'll have all that information before we see them. And then I get to give them my diagnosis. And let's say it's impingement syndrome of the shoulder. Well, if that's truly my diagnosis, well, we know what orthopedic tests, what ranges of motion, what neurologic things, what muscles should be in that note. If you're giving a diagnosis of a shoulder problem, do I need to ask questions about the soleus and gastroc and the muscles of the hand? No, I need to know what was around that area. So if you give a diagnosis of impingement syndrome, great, 100%. But now in our orthopedic session, should they have a positive Hawkins-Kennedy and NIRS test? Should they have a negative PFDQ test? And then should we also be ruling out a cervical radiculopathy, maybe a modified slump test or Valsalva? So what the EMR does is based on that diagnosis, it knows what test should be positive. It also knows what test should be negative. And we don't pre-populate those, but they're there on the screen ready for you to say yes, yes, no, no. And then also pre-populates the muscles that are involved. It doesn't say these muscles are hypertonic or trigger point or spastic. It says, hey, what's going on with these muscles? Because with that diagnosis, these are the muscles that should at least be. Yeah. And then also for impingement syndrome, just like you said, that you should know what all your chiropractors in your group are doing for a specific condition. You have to have a standard of care, right? So in ChiroUp for the last 10 years now, our providers have been billing what they do. I do dry needling, I do manipulation, manual therapy, I do these exercises. So everybody in ChiroUp network already has their recipes built. And so the plan, all we need to do is tie in the codes to those. So as a provider, all I need to do is say, yep, they have impingement syndrome. Those orthopedic tests are positive. These muscles, neurologic are negative. My new patient notes are taking me less than a minute, and they are tailored to the patient. They're also scrubbed, meaning they're scrubbed both clinically to make sure that whatever my diagnosis is, I support that with my note. But also we have a billing integration. So once I'm done with 2 clicks of a button, that billing is automatically sent out to a billing clearinghouse. It also automatically comes back in and applies to that patient invoice. So that was the number 2 thing that, 3 thing that people wanted was a billing service. There's some really nice EMRs out there, but I don't think anyone's done it the way we have, as far as having great notes, great scheduling, and then also having integrated billing, and doing it at hopefully a cost that's minimal. That's kind of the shit behind that, the EMR.
That's the secret sauce. You do see softwares that are really good on the billing part, okay on the EMR part. Very few really address the clinical part, and to have a system that is truly looking at all of the components that are involved in an encounter and making sure they're all correct. As I shared with your partner, you're basically building a better chiropractor.
Well, the hope is that we just get better each day.
Better profession, yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that people find disheartening is that they don't want to change. They don't want to. I'm doing A for 15 years. I don't want to start doing B. And I think, and maybe I hope that we don't push anyone to do anything differently. But if we can pull them and say, here's a little bit easier of a way to help more patients and honestly get reimbursed more, because that's what's going to happen, and get reimbursed faster. I think that's beneficial. Another thing that is interesting is that I was just in a hospital not too long ago, and they talked about why we don't have more chiropractors, because we work with Centero, they're in Virginia, big hospital group, or we're an advocate up in Northwestern. So ChiroUp works with a lot of hospital systems, and we incorporate into their chiropractic clinics. And the one thing they all have said to me, and I have not, tried to get this information, is that we don't charge enough. Is that one of the things that we don't do is we don't bill enough insurance and charge enough to be a viable model in their healthcare system. So hopefully, I think, in talking to third-party administrator and groups for insurance companies, is that if we can bill insurance easier, and I'm not telling chiropractors to go from cash to insurance, insurance to cash, you do you. But if we can make it easier to bill insurance for those people that are a touch scared or don't want the extra overhead of having a billing person, which, great, 100% honest, well, between you and me and the thousands of people that listen to this, my billing person left unexpectedly due to a health concern. But we were in a world of hurt. My clinic was in a world of hurt. Now, fortunately, my past office manager of 30 years came back to help us out, transition, and now we're good. But overhead's awful. If I can find a way to help people build insurance and can do it in a automated fashion, I hope that I can solve that little niche as far as a common problem with the chiropractic overhead.
Yep. So I got some just for fun questions. Who's your hero and why?
Hero, complete hero, or complete in the chiropractic profession?
Complete hero.
Oh man. Um. Oh, this is good. This is gonna sound really weird. My hero, my hero is probably my 14-year-old daughter. Because I have learned more from raising kids than I have in anything else. And I've said this in my head many times, but uh, I'd want her because every day is just a journey. That every day you don't know what you're going to get, but it's just fun and exciting to have someone. She has a very different personality than I have, and I just love it. I love learning from people who think differently than I do. And there's something about a child that they'll just flat out tell you what everyone else is thinking, but no one else wants to say. And she's that person that just leaves her mark.
Yeah, no doubt. I've heard people say that there is nothing like a child and a new puppy dog because you get to see things through their eyes that maybe you don't see the wonderment, you don't see the wow, because every experience to them is new, and that is, I mean, we're experiencing that now with, I've got a 3-year-old granddaughter, and I mean, like you said, every day is just wow. I mean, it really reconnects us with the wow factor that we had when we were children. I think that's why it's so appealing. Thanks for spending some time with us today, Brandon, and thank you all for listening to the ChiroSphere podcast. Please subscribe and share the podcast with your friends, and let us know who you'd like to hear from in the future or what topics you might like us to cover. If you want to learn more about ChiroHealth USA and how we can help you develop a compliant, profitable discount strategy that will absolutely grow your practice, income, and profitability, call us at 888-719-9990 or visit our website at chusa.com, and that's how you spell Chusa, to find out why ChiroHealth USA is the network that works for chiropractic in you. Thanks, Brandon.